to us first about how prices compare to this time last year. Obviously, you have a very unique seat here. So what sort of trends are you seeing when it comes to food inflation?
Well, the good news is that we're seeing prices the same or in some cases lower than what they were last year for turkeys for Thanksgiving. As you mentioned, we've seen retailers coming out with a lot of very strong pricing to help the consumers out there. And the lead on that is turkey. The consumers are telling us they do not plan to compromise on turkey. And the retailer is certainly passing on some really attractive feature prices so that consumers will get into their stores and get their holiday basket there.
That's interesting. I mean, and you think about turkey being the centerpiece of any Thanksgiving meal. It makes sense that that's not the item that you would want to compromise on, Jay. But I know that you've been with Butterball since 2002, so certainly you've seen plenty of economic cycles. And I wonder, this resilience and this hesitation to compromise on turkey specifically, how does this compare to past periods where we have had sticky, higher prices?
Well, it actually has been very consistent from a pricing standpoint, and we see that in the data and talking to consumers. 89% of the consumers that we talked to this year prior to the holiday plan to celebrate Thanksgiving, and 84% of those plan to have turkey on the table. And that's very consistent with what we've seen over the last numbers of years. So we're fortunate that with this very unique American holiday, folks don't want to deviate much. They want to kind of stick to the tradition and do what they've done in the past. And that's certainly good news for the turkey industry and great news for Butterball.
I am curious, Jay, just overall, not just with the holidays, with regards to turkey consumption, have you seen any changes in consumption habits based on what we've all been talking about, at least on this show, the idea of the rise of GLP-1 drugs, people being more conscious about their weight and other things? Has there been any sort of shift that you've seen in consumption patterns?
Well, it hasn't shown up in all the data just yet, but we certainly do hear a lot of consumers talking about more of a focus on protein, particularly low-fat protein. And turkey is a perfect candidate for that. We have a very good value for the consumer when they're looking for a high-protein source. There are certain categories that we've seen tremendous growth in, particularly ground turkey. Our Butterball brand has continued to grow throughout this year, double-digit growth. So we're seeing consumers really paying attention to those, which is great because that goes into their everyday meal, and not just as we think about turkey often as the holiday food, but it's something they can eat year-round, and it does fit great with that lifestyle.
Have you had any issues with regards to sourcing your birds and rearing them as well, with regards to either availability or, more importantly, the cost to raise and get them out the door?
No, we actually have a number of family farmers across the country, over 600 that grow turkeys for us. We've got a great partnership with those folks. We provide the turkeys to them, give them the feed to make sure they can grow the animals to our specifications. It's a great situation for us to work with those farmers to grow those. So we have a constant supply. We don't have to go out and look to purchase product from other companies. It works within our system, so we can plan very, very carefully for it throughout the year. And if there are any bumps in the road, we can make adjustments throughout the year to make sure that we've got an adequate supply to ensure that the consumer has the product on their table.
Well, Jay, related to that, bring us up to speed on what's going on with bird flu, because certainly we saw a lot of concerns about that, what that meant for the nation's chicken supply and also the egg supply. Was that as much of an issue for our nation's turkey flocks as well?
Well, it has impacted turkey for sure. We've seen that for the last several years. We're very, very fortunate that we're not in a short supply standpoint. We're confident that consumers are going to find the turkey for their Thanksgiving table, so that's great news. And we're also very, very positive that the federal government has invested in trying to find a solution to this. They've looking for prevention and intervention systems. They've allocated $1 billion to go to help prevent the spread of this disease. So we're very positive in our thoughts about finding a solution that ultimately will help eradicate this disease that we've been facing for the last several years.
All right, Jay, enough with the hard-hitting questions here. I want to get down to brass tacks here. Do you roast? Do you fry? Do you smoke? Do you grill? How do you cook your turkey?
Actually, all of the above. So it's funny you say that. I always do too. I always have one that's roasted. And I actually just asked my kids to put in their vote for what the second one's going to be. Is it going to be fried, smoked, or grilled? So you hit on every process that I look at to make a turkey this year. And the jury's still out. I'm waiting for all the votes to come in, and we'll decide what we're going to do for that second turkey.
I think my family is frying this year, which really makes
yeah?
me nervous. It feels like there's a lot of ways where that can go wrong, Jay. But you touched on this a little bit earlier in the conversation, and I do wonder how you make turkey extend beyond just Thanksgiving. Of course, there's ground turkey. That seems to have its use cases. But how do you sort of appeal to the average American consumer and make them think of turkey outside of just Thanksgiving?
Well, you might be interested to know that about a third of our business is evolved around the holidays between Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and the rest of it is year round. So one of the things that we're doing is really looking at how we're talking to those consumers, and we're finding, our consumer base is changing. The people who are making the buying decisions now are getting younger, as they are with many other categories. So we're finding new ways to talk to them, to reach them in the places they're getting their information, and to make sure that as they're now beginning to be the shoppers in the household, that they look for turkey as a good option. And great news, as we mentioned earlier, it fits in very, very well with the kind of the diets that folks are looking for these days. It's a very healthy protein, and it's great for people who are active and looking to get the most out of their food dollar as well, being a very economical protein to purchase.